There are calls that change everything, and the call that came to Caleb Hayes at 2:04 a.m. wasn't meant for him. A trembling female voice, desperate, pleading with a complete stranger for help. He could have hung up, but something in her voice, the raw, unvarnished fear, made it impossible for him to do so. So he drove through the storm, following a faint signal, to find a young woman shaking beside her broken-down car. He didn't know her name, didn't know what she was running from, but in the hours to come, he would become the only thing standing between her and whatever was chasing her. If you want to know how this story ends, stay until the end, hit like, and comment the name of the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The rain came down like it had a grudge. Caleb Hayes sat in the cab of his tow truck, windows fogged, heater rattling, watching the wipers lose their fight against the downpour. The clock on the dash read 2:04 a.m. He'd been parked outside the 24-hour diner on Route 9 for the better part of an hour, nursing cold coffee and waiting for a call that might not come. Late-night roadside work was unpredictable like that, either dead quiet or back-to-back chaos. Tonight had been the former, and he was about ready to head home when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. For a second, he considered letting it go to voicemail. But work was work, and his daughter's school tuition didn't pay itself. He swiped to answer. Hayes roadside, this is Caleb. Silence. Then a breath. Shaky. Thin. Hello? He tried again. The voice was female, young, barely holding together. I need help. My car, it won't move. I don't know what to do. Caleb straightened. Okay, slow down. Where are you? I don't know exactly. I was trying to get to the interstate, but I turned somewhere and now Her voice cracked. I'm on some back road. There's trees everywhere. The tire, it just blew and I can't. Hey, Caleb cut in, keeping his tone steady. You're all right. I'm going to help you. Do you see any signs? Anything that tells me where you are? A pause. He heard rain hammering metal in the background, wind howling. There's a mailbox. It says, I can't read it. It's too dark. What about your GPS? Can you check your location? My phone's almost dead, she said. And there was something else beneath the panic now, something raw and exhausted. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes. I called the first number I found. I don't even know if this is the right... It's the right number, Caleb said, though he was pretty sure it wasn't. She'd probably Googled roadside assistance and hit the first listing. Just stay calm. Can you see any landmarks, a gas station, a bridge, anything? She hesitated. There's a barn, old, falling apart. And a creek, I think. I can hear water. Caleb's mind clicked through the map of back roads he'd memorized over 15 years of towing. Barn, creek, trees, that described half the county. But there was one stretch, maybe 10 miles east, where the creek ran close to the road and an old dairy barn sat half-collapsed near the turnoff to Miller's Pass. All right, he said, already turning the key in the ignition. I think I know where you are. I'm heading your way now. You stay in the car, doors locked, okay? Okay. Her voice was so small. What's your name? A beat. Elena. Elena, I'm Caleb. I'm going to get to you in about 15 minutes. You just hang tight. Thank you, she whispered, and the line went dead. Caleb tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and pulled out onto the empty highway. The rain slammed against the windshield like gravel, the road slick and black beneath his headlights. He wasn't even sure this was a real call. Could have been a prank, a wrong number, someone who'd already gotten help and forgotten to cancel. But something in her voice stuck with him. The fear wasn't performed. It was lived in, familiar, like she'd been carrying it long before the tire blew. He pushed the truck faster. Oops. The road to Miller's Pass was narrow and winding, hemmed in by dense trees that clawed at the sky. Caleb had been out here before, mostly for abandoned vehicles, the occasional drunk driver who'd misjudged a turn. It wasn't the kind of place you ended up by accident. You had to be trying to get lost. He spotted her car about 12 minutes in. It was a sleek black sedan, expensive looking even in the rain, pulled halfway onto the shoulder with the front tire completely shredded. The hazard lights blinked weakly through the downpour. Caleb eased the tow truck to a stop behind it, grabbed his flashlight and a rain slicker, and climbed out into the storm. The cold hit him immediately, soaking through his jeans before he'd taken 3 steps. He approached the driver's side window and tapped the glass with his knuckles. The door cracked open. Elena looked up at him, and for a moment Caleb forgot how to speak. She was younger than he'd expected, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair plastered to her face and eyes that were too wide, too bright. She wore a tailored coat that probably cost more than his truck, but it was rumpled and rain-stained, and her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the door. "Caleb?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. "That's me." He crouched down so he was at her level. "You okay?" She nodded, but it was a lie. He could see it in the way her shoulders were locked, the way her breathing came too fast. "All right," he said gently. "Let me take a look at the tire, and then we'll get you out of here." She didn't move, just stared at him like she was trying to decide if he was real. "Elena," he said, "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to fix your car." Something in his tone must have landed because she nodded again, slower this time, and let go of the door. Caleb stood and walked around to the front of the sedan. The tire was a lost cause. Completely blown, the rubber hanging in strips. He'd need to swap it out, assuming she had a spare. He popped the trunk and found one, along with a jack that looked like it had never been used. He got to work. The rain didn't let up. It pounded his back, soaked through the slicker, turned the ground beneath him into mud. His hands were numb within minutes, but he kept moving, loosening the lug nuts, lifting the car, pulling the ruined tire free. He didn't mind the cold. It gave him something to focus on, something other than the way Elena had looked at him, like she was bracing for him to be someone else. When he finally got the spare on and tightened, he stood and wiped his hands on his jeans. The whole thing had taken maybe 20 minutes, but it felt longer. He walked back to her window and tapped again. She rolled it down halfway. "You're all set," he said. "Spare's on. It'll get you where you need to go, but you'll want to replace it soon." "Thank you." She looked like she wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Caleb hesitated. "You sure you're okay to drive? You seem—" "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. He didn't believe her, but he also knew better than to push. People had their reasons for being out here in the middle of the night, and most of those reasons weren't his business. "All right," he said. "Just be careful. Roads are bad tonight." He started to turn away, but her voice stopped him. "Wait." He looked back. Elena's hands were still gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. I don't know where I'm going." Caleb frowned. "You said you were trying to get to the interstate." "I was, but I don't—" She broke off, and for the first time he saw something crack in her composure. "I don't know what I'm doing. I just got in the car and started driving, and now I'm—" Her breath hitched. "I'm lost." Caleb stood there in the rain, water streaming down his face, and made a decision he'd probably regret. "There's a diner about 10 miles back," he said. "Open all night. You could get some coffee, wait out the storm." She looked at him like he'd just offered her a lifeline. "I'll follow you," he added. "Make sure you get there safe." "You don't have to do that." "I know." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena nodded, slow and deliberate, and rolled up her window. Caleb walked back to his truck, climbed in, and waited for her to pull out onto the road. She did, tentative and careful, and he fell in behind her, headlights cutting through the dark. The diner was called the Bluebird, a squat little building with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered like a dying heartbeat. Caleb had been coming here for years, knew the waitress by name, knew which booth had the least uncomfortable seats. It was the kind of place that didn't ask questions, which made it perfect for nights like this. Elena parked near the entrance, and Caleb pulled up beside her. They both got out, moving quickly through the rain, and ducked inside. The warmth hit them immediately, along with the smell of burnt coffee and frying bacon. The place was nearly empty, just a trucker in the corner booth and an old man nursing a cup at the counter. The waitress, a woman named Darlene, with bleached hair and a smoker's rasp, glanced up as they walked in. "Caleb," she said, like she'd been expecting him. "Usual?" "Just coffee, thanks." He gestured to Elena. "For both of us." Darlene's eyes flicked to Elena, taking in the expensive coat and the haunted expression. But she didn't say anything, just nodded and poured 2 cups. Caleb led Elena to a booth in the back, away from the windows. She slid in across from him, and for a long moment they just sat there, dripping rainwater onto the cracked vinyl seats. "Thank you," Elena said finally, "for everything. I don't usually—" "Don't worry about it," Caleb said. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, letting the heat seep into his fingers. "Bad night to be out on the road." "Bad night to be anywhere," she murmured. He studied her across the table. Up close, in the harsh fluorescent light, he could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days, or someone who'd been running. "You want to tell me what you're running from?" he asked quietly. Elena's gaze snapped up, and for a second he thought she might bolt. But then her shoulders sagged, and she let out a breath that sounded like defeat. "Is it that obvious?" "Little bit." She looked down at her coffee, turning the cup in slow circles. "I'm not running from someone. I'm running from everything." Caleb waited. "My father," she said after a long pause. He's not a bad man. Not in the way you'd think, but She struggled for the words. "He's controlling. Every decision, every choice, it's already been made for me. Who I see, where I go, what I do with my life. And I couldn't do it anymore." "So you left?" "I tried to." She laughed, bitter and hollow. "Got about 50 miles before I realized I had no plan, no destination, nothing. Just a tank of gas and a blown tire." Caleb sipped his coffee. "Where were you planning to go?" "I don't know. Anywhere. Nowhere." She rubbed her eyes. "God, I sound pathetic." You sound scared," Caleb said. "Not the same thing." Elena looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression, like she was seeing him for the first time. "What about you?" she asked. "What are you doing out here at 2 a.m? "Work," he said simply. "I run a roadside service. People break down. I show up." "That's it? You just drive around in the middle of the night helping strangers?" "Pretty much." "Why?" Caleb shrugged. "Pays the bills, and I don't sleep much anyway." "Why not?" He hesitated. It wasn't a question he got asked often, and he wasn't sure how to answer it without sounding like a cliché. But there was something about the way Elena was looking at him, open, unguarded, that made him want to try. "I've got a daughter," he said. "She's 12. Lives with me full time. Her mom—" He paused. "Her mom's not in the picture, so it's just the two of us. And sometimes when she's asleep and the house is quiet, I feel like I'm going to crawl out of my skin if I don't do something, so I drive." Elena's expression softened. "That sounds lonely." "It is," Caleb admitted, "but it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "Sitting still." They lapsed into silence again, but it was different this time, less awkward, more companionable. Outside, the rain continued its assault, drumming against the windows like it was trying to get in. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked suddenly. "Being a parent, I mean. Doing it alone." Caleb didn't even have to think about it. "No, not for a second." "Why not?" "Because she's the only thing I've ever done that actually mattered," he said. "Everything else, work, relationships, all of it, it's just noise. But her? She's real, she's mine. And I'd do anything to make sure she's okay." Elena stared at him, and he could see something working behind her eyes. Some calculation, some question she wasn't ready to ask yet. "What?" he said. "Nothing," she said quietly. "It's just, you make it sound simple." "It's not," Caleb said, "but it's worth it." "Even when it's hard?" "Especially when it's hard." Elena looked away, and for a moment Caleb thought he'd lost her. But then she spoke, so soft he almost didn't hear it. "I don't think I know how to do that." "Do what?" "Choose something hard because it's worth it." She met his eyes. "I've spent my whole life doing what's easy, what's expected, and I don't even know who I am underneath all of it." Caleb leaned back in his seat, considering her. "You want my advice?" "I don't know, do I?" "Stop trying to figure out who you are," he said. "Just start making choices. Even small ones. The rest will follow." Elena blinked. "That's it? That's your advice?" "That's it." "It sounds too simple." "Most things are," Caleb said. We just complicate them because it makes us feel like we're doing something. She stared at him for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, she laughed. It was a small sound, almost fragile, but it was real. "You're very strange," she said. "I get that a lot." The tension between them eased just a little, and they settled into their coffee. Darlene came by to refill their cups, giving Caleb a look that clearly said, "What the hell are you doing?" He ignored her. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said after a while. "Sure." "Why did you help me?" Caleb frowned. "What do you mean?" "I called the wrong number. You didn't have to come. You didn't have to fix my car or follow me here or sit with me. You could have just hung up." He thought about that. "Yeah, I could have. But you didn't." "No." "Why?" Caleb set his cup down and looked at her straight. "Because you asked." Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the angle. "That's it?" she said finally. "I asked, so you helped? That's it? You do that for everyone?" "When I can." She shook her head slowly, like she was trying to make sense of him and failing. "You're either the best person I've ever met or the dumbest." "Probably both," Caleb said. This time, when she laughed, it lasted a little longer. They stayed at the diner until the rain started to let up, which took another hour. By the time they walked back outside, the storm had downgraded to a steady drizzle, the kind that soaked you slow instead of all at once. The sky was still dark, but there was a faint lightness at the edges, dawn creeping in, reluctant and cold. Elena stood by her car, keys in hand, looking uncertain. "You gonna be okay?" Caleb asked. She nodded. "I think so." You know where you're going?" "Not yet," she admitted, "but I'll figure it out." Caleb didn't push. He just pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. It was bent at the corners, ink smudged, but it had his name and number printed clear enough. "If you get stuck again," he said, "or if you just need someone to talk to, call." Elena took the card, turning it over in her fingers like it was something precious. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." She looked up at him, and for a second he thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just nodded, slow and deliberate, and slipped the card into her pocket. "Thank you, Caleb," she said. "For tonight. For all of it. Any time." She got into her car, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. Caleb watched her taillights disappear into the drizzle, then climb back into his truck. He sat there for a minute, hands on the wheel, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into his bones. His phone buzzed, a text from his daughter's school. Reminder, parent-teacher conference tomorrow at 3 p.m. He sighed, rubbed his eyes, and started the engine. The house was quiet when he got home. He kicked off his boots by the door, hung up the rain slicker, and walked through the dark living room to the kitchen. The clock on the microwave said 4:47 a.m. He had maybe an hour before his daughter woke up, which meant he had maybe an hour to sleep. He didn't bother, just put on a pot of coffee and sat at the table staring at nothing. He kept thinking about Elena, about the way she'd looked at him in the diner, like he was some kind of puzzle she couldn't solve. He didn't know why it bothered him. People looked at him like that all the time, like they couldn't square the guy who fixed cars with the guy who raised a kid alone. Like those two things didn't fit together. But they did. They had to. Because if they didn't, what the hell was he doing? Upstairs, a door creaked open. Footsteps on the stairs, light and quick. His daughter appeared in the doorway, hair a mess, still in her pajamas. "You're up early," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Couldn't sleep," Caleb said. She crossed to the fridge, pulled out a carton of orange juice, and drank straight from it. He didn't have the energy to scold her. "Rough night?" she asked, leaning against the counter. "You could say that." "Well, you look like crap." "Thanks, Mia. Real supportive." She grinned, and despite everything, Caleb felt something in his chest loosen. This kid, sarcastic, stubborn, too smart for her own good, was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. Without her, he'd have floated off a long time ago. "You got that conference today," she said, pouring herself a glass of juice this time. "Mrs. Palmer's going to tell you I'm doing great, and you're going to pretend to be surprised. Am I that predictable?" "Yes." He laughed, short and tired. "All right. Noted." Mia sat down across from him, studying his face. "Seriously, though, You okay? Caleb looked at his daughter, 12 years old, already carrying herself like someone twice that age, and felt the full weight of what he'd taken on when her mother left. He thought about Elena, sitting in that diner, asking him how he did it, how he chose the hard thing. The truth was, he hadn't chosen it. It had chosen him. But he'd said yes anyway. I'm okay, he told Mia. Just tired. You're always tired. Comes with the job. She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. They sat there in the pre-dawn quiet, drinking coffee and orange juice respectively, while the world outside started to wake up. 3 days passed before Elena called again. Caleb was under the hood of a busted Chevy in the shop when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer. His hands were covered in grease and the engine was giving him hell, but the number looked familiar. He wiped his hands on a rag and picked up. Hayes roadside. Caleb? Her voice was different this time, steadier, but still uncertain. It's Elena. He straightened. Hey, you all right? She paused. I need your help again. What happened? Car breakdown? No, nothing like that. Another pause, longer this time. I need someone to talk to, and I didn't know who else to call. Caleb glanced at the Chevy, then at the clock on the wall. He had another 2 hours of work ahead of him, easy, but something in her voice pulled at him. Where are you? He asked. I'm at a hotel, the Riverside on Route 32. He knew the place. Mid-range, nothing fancy, the kind of spot people stayed when they didn't want to be found. Give me 30 minutes, he said. You don't have to. I know. I'll be there. He hung up, told his assistant to finish the Chevy, and headed out. No. The Riverside Hotel sat just off the highway, a low-slung brick building with a parking lot full of out-of-state plates. Caleb found Elena's car near the back and parked beside it. She was waiting outside her room, leaning against the railing, arms crossed. She looked better than she had the other night, cleaner, more put together, but there was still that same exhaustion in her eyes. Thanks for coming, she said as he approached. No problem. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. What's going on? Elena looked past him, toward the highway. I've been staying here since that night, just trying to figure out what to do next. And I don't know. She let out a breath. I thought leaving would make things clearer, but it didn't. I'm just stuck. Caleb leaned against the railing beside her. You talked to your father? No, he's been calling, but I haven't answered. She glanced at him. I know I can't avoid him forever, but every time I think about going back, I can't. Then don't. She laughed, sharp and bitter. It's not that simple. Why not? Because he controls everything. My bank accounts, my car, the apartment I was living in. It's all his. If I cut him off, I lose everything. So you start over. Elena stared at him. Just like that? Start over? Yeah. With what? I don't have a job. I don't have money. I don't have... She broke off, frustrated. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, Caleb said, but it's possible. People do it all the time. People like you, maybe. People like anyone, he countered. You think I had some big plan when my daughter's mom walked out? I didn't. I just figured it out as I went. Elena shook her head. That's different. How? Because you had something to fight for. I don't even know what I want. Caleb turned to face her fully. Then figure it out. Stop waiting for permission, or clarity, or whatever it is you think you need. Just pick something and go after it. And if I pick wrong, then you pick again. She looked at him like he'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. You really believe that? I have to, Caleb said. Otherwise, what's the point? For a long moment, Elena didn't say anything. She just stood there staring out at the highway, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? I'll try. It wasn't much, but it was something. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the cars go by. Eventually, Elena spoke again. Can I ask you something else? Sure. Why do you keep helping me? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Caleb thought about that. Maybe I just believe in second chances. Or third, or fourth, he smiled. Those two. Elena looked at him, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled back. It was small, tentative, but real. You're a good person, Caleb Hayes. I'm just a guy fixing cars, he said. No, she said softly. You're more than that. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, and they stood there together as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. When Caleb got home that night, Mia was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up as he walked in. You're late, she said. I know, sorry. She studied him, eyes narrowed. You're doing that thing again. What thing? That thing where you help someone and pretend it's no big deal. Caleb sighed. It's not a big deal. Uh-huh. She went back to her homework. Just don't forget you've got people here who need you too. He walked over and ruffled her hair, ignoring her protest. I know, kid. I know. And he did. But as he stood there in his kitchen, with his daughter bent over her math homework and the weight of the day pressing down on him, he couldn't help but think about Elena, about the way she'd looked at him when she said he was more than just a guy fixing cars. He didn't know if that was true. But for the first time in a long time, he wanted to find out. 2 weeks went by before Caleb heard from Elena again, and in that time, he'd almost convinced himself she'd figured things out. Gone back to her life, patched things up with her father, moved on. People did that. They had moments of clarity, flashes of rebellion, and then reality settled back in and they made peace with whatever cage they'd been living in. He didn't judge it. Hell, he understood it better than most. But on a Thursday afternoon, while he was replacing brake pads on a Honda Civic and Mia was at soccer practice, his phone rang. Elena's name flashed on the screen. He answered on the third ring, wiping grease off his hands. Hey. Hi. Her voice sounded different, lighter, almost nervous. Are you busy? I'm always busy, Caleb said. What's up? I got a job. He blinked. Yeah? Yeah, it's nothing major. Front desk at a boutique hotel downtown. But it's mine. I applied, I interviewed, and they hired me. She paused. I start Monday. Caleb felt something shift in his chest, something that might have been pride if he'd had any right to feel it. That's great, Elena. Really. I wanted to tell you, she said quickly, because you were right about just picking something. I did, and it worked. Good. That's really good. There was a beat of silence, and then she said, I also wanted to ask you something. All right. There's this event tomorrow night, a fundraiser for a children's hospital. My father's company is hosting it, and She hesitated. I know I should probably stay away, but I want to go. I want to show him I'm still standing, but I don't want to go alone. Caleb set down the wrench he'd been holding. You want me to come with you? If you can. I know it's last minute, and it's probably way outside your comfort zone, but what time? He cut in. 7. It's at the Grandview Hotel. He thought about his schedule. Had a tow job lined up for 6, but he could pass it off to Jimmy. Mia had a sleepover at her friend's place, so he'd be free. And even if he wasn't, something in Elena's voice told him she needed this. I'll be there, he said. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. He could hear the relief in her exhale. Thank you, Caleb. I mean it. Don't mention it. After they hung up, he stood there in the garage for a long moment, staring at the Honda like it might have answers. A fundraiser. At the Grandview, with Elena's father and whatever world she'd been running from. This was a bad idea. He knew it in his gut. But he'd said yes anyway, because that's what he did. Said yes to things that probably didn't concern him, and then dealt with the fallout later. He grabbed his phone and texted Mia. Need to borrow your opinion tomorrow. Emergency wardrobe situation. She texted back immediately. OMG, are you going on a date? It's not a date. Sure, Dad. Sure. He didn't bother responding. The next evening, Caleb stood in front of his closet and realized he owned exactly one shirt that didn't have a company logo on it. It was dark blue, wrinkled, and smelled faintly like the back of his truck. He ironed it, badly, and paired it with the least faded jeans he had. Mia had tried to convince him to buy a tie, but he'd drawn the line there. He wasn't showing up to this thing in a suit. He'd just be out of place in something more honest. The Grandview Hotel was downtown, all glass and steel and understated wealth. Caleb pulled into the valet area and immediately regretted every choice that had led him here. A kid in a vest took his keys, looked at the tow truck like it had personally offended him, and handed Caleb a ticket without a word. Inside, the lobby was all marble floors and chandeliers, the kind of place where you felt underdressed even if you weren't. Caleb spotted Elena near the entrance to the ballroom, standing alone in a black dress that probably cost more than his mortgage. She looked nervous. When she saw him, her face lit up. "You came," she said, crossing to him. "Told you I would." She looked him up and down, and for a second he thought she might comment on the jeans, but she just smiled. "You look good." "Liar." "I'm serious." She straightened his collar, her fingers light against his shirt. "You look like yourself. That's better than most of the people here." Caleb glanced past her into the ballroom, where groups of well-dressed people stood in clusters, holding wine glasses and pretending to enjoy themselves. "This your world?" "It was," Elena said quietly. "I'm not sure what it is now." "You nervous?" "Terrified." "Want to leave?" She looked at him, surprised. "We just got here." "So?" "If you don't want to do this, we don't have to." For a moment he thought she might take him up on it, but then she shook her head, something hardening in her expression. "No, I need to do this." "All right," Caleb said. "Then let's go." They walked into the ballroom together, and immediately heads turned. Caleb felt it, the weight of eyes, the silent assessments. He wasn't used to being looked at like this, like he was something that didn't belong. But Elena kept her chin up, her hand resting lightly on his arm, and he followed her lead. The room was massive, filled with round tables draped in white linen, a stage at the far end where a string quartet played something soft and forgettable. Servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that Caleb couldn't pronounce. It was the kind of event where everyone knew everyone, and everyone was performing some version of themselves that wasn't quite real. "Elena." The voice came from behind them, smooth and cold. Caleb turned to see a man approaching, tall, late 50s, with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than Caleb's truck. His face was composed, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Elena's hand tightened on Caleb's arm. "Father," she said evenly. The man stopped a few feet away, his gaze flicking to Caleb and then back to his daughter. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to come," Elena said, "but I changed my mind." "I see." His attention shifted fully to Caleb now, assessing. "And you are C." "Caleb Hayes," Caleb said, extending a hand. Elena's father looked at the offered hand like it was a foreign object, then shook it briefly. His grip was firm, controlled. "Richard Ward, Elena's father." "Nice to meet you." "Is it?" Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. He turned back to Elena. "We need to talk." "We're talking now," Elena said, privately. "No." Richard's expression tightened, just barely. "Elena, I said no." Her voice was steady, but Caleb could feel the tension radiating off her. "If you have something to say to me, you can say it here." For a long moment, Richard didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at his daughter like she was a problem he was trying to solve. Then he glanced at Caleb again. "Who is this man to you?" Richard asked. "A friend." "A friend?" Richard's tone made it clear what he thought of that. "You've been gone for 2 weeks, Elena. No calls, no messages, and now you show up here with—" He gestured vaguely at Caleb. "With him." "His name is Caleb," Elena said sharply. "And yes, I've been gone, because I needed space, because you wouldn't give it to me. I was trying to protect you." "You were trying to control me." Richard's jaw tightened. "This isn't the time or place for this conversation." "Then when is?" Elena's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby guests. "When you've decided I've been punished enough? When you've arranged my life the way you want it? Keep your voice down." "No." Elena stepped forward and Caleb moved with her, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to let her handle this. "I'm done being quiet. I'm done pretending everything's fine when it's not." Richard glanced around, clearly aware of the attention they were drawing. "We'll discuss this later." "We'll discuss it now," Elena said, "or we won't discuss it at all." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Caleb watched Richard's face, saw the moment the man realized he wasn't going to win this. Not here. Not like this. Fine, Richard said quietly. What do you want from me, Elena? I want you to let me go. Let you go where? To what? You don't have a plan. You don't have resources. You're going to end up... I have a job, Elena interrupted. I have an apartment lined up. I have a life that doesn't revolve around you. Richard stared at her. You have a job. Yes. Doing what? Front desk at a hotel. For a second, Caleb thought Richard might laugh, but he didn't. He just looked at his daughter like she'd told him she was moving to Mars. You're serious, Richard said. Yes. Elena, you don't need to work some menial job to prove a point. If you need independence, we can... I don't want your version of independence, Elena said. I want my own. Richard's gaze shifted back to Caleb, and there was something dangerous in it now. Is this his idea? No, Elena said before Caleb could respond. This is mine. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you believe. The words hung in the air, stark and final. Richard's expression went cold, and when he spoke again, his voice was low and controlled. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Elena said, but it's my mistake to make. Richard looked at her for a long moment, and Caleb saw something flicker across his face. Grief, maybe, or anger, or both. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd without another word. Elena stood there, breathing hard, her hand still on Caleb's arm. He could feel her shaking. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded, but didn't speak. You want to leave? Not yet. She looked up at him and there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. I need a drink first, but They found a quieter corner of the ballroom near the windows overlooking the city. Elena downed half a glass of champagne in one go, then set it down and pressed her palms to her face. I can't believe I just did that, she said, her voice muffled. You did good, Caleb said. She lowered her hands. Did I? Because I feel like I just blew up my entire life. You stood up for yourself. That's not nothing. It doesn't feel like enough. It's a start. Elena looked out at the city, the lights stretching endlessly below them. What if he's right? What if I don't know what I'm doing? Nobody knows what they're doing, Caleb said. They just pretend better. She laughed, short and bitter. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be true. She turned to face him, studying his expression. How do you do that? Do what? Make everything sound so simple. I don't think it's simple, Caleb said. I just think most people overcomplicate it. And you don't? I try not to. Elena shook her head, but she was smiling now. You're ridiculous. I've been told. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the city. Eventually, Elena spoke again, her voice quieter. Thank you for coming tonight. I don't think I could have done that without you. You could have, Caleb said. But I'm glad I was here. She looked at him, and something shifted in her expression, something soft and uncertain. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why do you keep showing up for me? Caleb thought about that. He'd asked himself the same question more than once over the past few weeks. Because nobody showed up for me when I needed it, he said finally, and I know what that feels like. Elena's eyes searched his face. What happened? My ex-wife left when Mia was 2, Caleb said. Just walked out one day. Didn't leave a note, didn't explain. Just gone. And for a long time I was angry. At her, at myself, at everything. But then I realized being angry wasn't helping Mia. So I figured I'd just show up every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. That must have been awful. It was, Caleb admitted. But it also taught me something, that the people who stay matter more than the people who leave. And if I can be the person who stays for someone else, even a stranger, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Elena stared at him, and for a moment she looked like she might cry. But then she stepped forward and hugged him, quick and tight, before pulling back. You're a good man, Caleb Hayes, she said. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, and they stood there together, two people who'd found each other by accident and decided to stay. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Elena introduced Caleb to a few people, colleagues of her father's, old friends from a life she was leaving behind. Most of them were polite but distant, clearly unsure what to make of him. He didn't mind. He wasn't here for them. Around 10, Elena said she was ready to leave, and Caleb walked her out to the valet area. Her car arrived first, and she lingered by the door, keys in hand. "What are you doing tomorrow?" she asked. "Working, probably." "Why?" "I was thinking maybe we could grab coffee or lunch if you're free." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "You trying to be friends with me, Elena?" She smiled. "Maybe. Is that okay?" "Yeah," he said. "It's okay." "Good." She opened her car door, then paused. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I meant what I said earlier about you being a good man. I don't think you hear that enough." Before he could respond, she got in the car and drove off, leaving him standing there in the cool night air, watching her taillights disappear. When Caleb got home, Mia was already back from her sleepover, sprawled on the couch watching some show on her laptop. She looked up as he walked in. "How was the not date?" she asked. "It wasn't a date," Caleb said, hanging up his keys. "Uh-huh. Did you have fun?" "It was fine," Mia grinned. "You like her?" "I don't—" Caleb stopped, realizing he was being baited. "Go to bed. It's only 10:30. Then go to your room and pretend to sleep." She laughed and closed her laptop. "You're so weird when you like someone." "I'm going to ground you." "No, you're not." She was right. He wasn't. He watched her head upstairs, shaking his head, and then collapsed onto the couch. His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "Thank you again for tonight. You didn't have to do that." He typed back. "Yes, I did." Her response came a minute later. "Why?" Caleb stared at the screen, thinking about how to answer that. Finally, he wrote, "Because you asked." The three dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. When her message finally came through, it was just two words. "You're impossible." He smiled and set the phone down. Over the next week, Caleb and Elena fell into an easy rhythm. She'd text him in the mornings before work, asking about his day, or sharing some absurd story from the hotel. He'd respond between toe jobs, keeping it light, keeping it simple. They met for coffee twice, once at the diner and once at a place near her new apartment. The conversations were easy, unforced, the kind that felt like they'd known each other longer than they had. But underneath it all, Caleb could sense something building, something neither of them was ready to name yet. On Friday afternoon, Elena called while he was finishing up an oil change. "Hey," she said, "are you free tonight?" "Depends. What's up?" "I got my first paycheck," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I want to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just dinner, my treat." Caleb wiped his hands on a rag. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to." He thought about saying no, about keeping the distance he knew he should probably maintain, but then he thought about the way she'd sounded the night of the fundraiser, the way she'd stood up to her father, and he couldn't. "All right," he said. "Where?" "There's a place on 5th Street. Mario's. You know it?" "Yeah, I know it." 7? "I'll be there." When he hung up, he realized he was smiling, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel guilty about it. Mario's was a small Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and loud and full of life. Caleb got there early, claimed a booth in the back, and waited. Elena arrived 10 minutes later wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked different than she had at the fundraiser, more relaxed, more herself. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Traffic was awful." "You're fine." They ordered pasta for her, chicken parm for him, and spent the first 20 minutes talking about nothing important. Work, weather, the weird guy at the hotel who kept asking Elena if she believed in aliens. It was easy, comfortable, and Caleb found himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in months. But then, halfway through dinner, Elena set down her fork and looked at him. Can I tell you something? She asked. Sure. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about choosing things, about not waiting for permission. Yeah? And I realized I've spent my whole life waiting for my father to approve, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone to tell me it was okay to want something. She paused. But I don't want to wait anymore. Caleb set down his own fork, meeting her gaze. What do you want? Elena hesitated, and for a moment he thought she might deflect. But then she said, I want to build something that matters. I've been thinking about starting a foundation, something that helps women who are in situations like I was, women who need a way out but don't know where to start. Caleb felt something tighten in his chest. That's a big idea. I know, and I don't know if I can do it, but I want to try. You should. Really? Yeah, if that's what you want, you should go for it. Elena smiled, and it was the kind of smile that changed her whole face. You make it sound so easy. It's not, Caleb said, but nothing worth doing is. She reached across the table and touched his hand just briefly. Thank you. For what? For believing in me. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something he'd been avoiding for weeks. He cared about this woman, not just as someone he'd helped, but as someone he wanted to keep knowing. And that terrified him. Elena, he started, not sure where the sentence was going, but before he could finish, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Mia. Sorry, he said. I have to take this. Of course. He stepped outside, answered. Hey, what's up? Dad? Mia's voice was small, scared. I'm at Sarah's house. Her mom got really sick, and they had to call an ambulance, and now I'm here alone, and I don't know what to... Hey, slow down, Caleb said, his heart hammering. Where's Sarah? She went with her mom, but I'm scared, and I'm coming to get you, right now. Stay inside, lock the door, and I'll be there in 15 minutes. Okay. He hung up and rushed back inside. Elena looked up, concerned. Everything okay? No, I have to go. My daughter... Go, Elena said immediately, standing. We can do this another time. Caleb hesitated, torn. I'm sorry. Don't be. Go. He left cash on the table and bolted. Set. By the time Caleb got Mia home and calmed her down, it was past 11. Sarah's mom had stabilized, heart palpitations, not a heart attack, and Mia had stopped shaking. But Caleb sat with her until she fell asleep, just to be sure. His phone buzzed around midnight. Elena, is everything okay? Yeah, just a scare. Mia's fine. I'm glad. Let me know if you need anything. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. This was his life. Unpredictable, chaotic, pulled in a dozen directions at once. And Elena's life was just starting to stabilize, just starting to make sense. He didn't know how those two things fit together. But as he lay there in the dark, he couldn't stop thinking about the way she'd looked at him across the table, the way her hand had felt against his. And he realized, with a sinking certainty, that it was already too late to walk away. The week that followed felt like waiting for a storm that never quite broke. Caleb went through the motions, work, picking up Mia, making dinner, collapsing into bed, but his mind kept circling back to that night at Mario's, to the way Elena had looked at him when she talked about building something that mattered. He wanted to call her, wanted to finish the conversation they'd started, but every time he picked up his phone, he talked himself out of it. Mia noticed. She always noticed. You're being weird again, she said on Wednesday morning, pouring cereal into a bowl with more force than necessary. I'm not being weird. You've checked your phone like 6 times in the last 10 minutes. Caleb set the phone face down on the counter. I'm expecting a call about a parts order. Sure you are. She shoveled cereal into her mouth, watching him over the rim of the bowl. Is it the lady from the fundraiser? Her name's Elena, and no. Liar. I'm going to start charging you rent if you keep this up. Mia grinned, and Caleb felt some of the tension in his chest ease. This kid, stubborn, nosy, too smart for anyone's good, was the only thing that kept him grounded. Without her, he'd have spiraled a long time ago. His phone buzzed. Elena's name flashed on the screen. Mia's eyes lit up. That her? Caleb grabbed the phone and walked into the next room. Yes, And you're going to school early today. Worth it, she called after him. He answered on the third ring. Hey. Hi. Elena's voice sounded tentative. Is this a bad time? No, it's fine. What's up? I was wondering if you were free this afternoon. I have something I want to show you. Caleb glanced at the clock. He had a tow job at 2, but he could move it. Yeah, I can do that. Where? There's an address I'll text you. It's downtown, near the Arts District. All right, what is it? You'll see, Elena said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Can you be there around 3? I'll make it work. Thank you, Caleb. After they hung up, he stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. Then he walked back into the kitchen, where Mia was finishing her cereal with a smug expression. You're meeting her, she said. I'm meeting her. I knew it. You don't know anything. I know you like her. Caleb sighed and grabbed his keys. Come on, I'm driving you to school. Can I meet her? No. Why not? Because you're 12 and you ask too many questions. Mia laughed, grabbing her backpack. You're going to marry her, aren't you? Get in the truck. But as he drove her to school, watching her chatter about some drama with her soccer team, he couldn't shake the thought. Not marriage, that was absurd, but something. Something that scared him more than he wanted to admit. What? The address Elena had sent him led to a narrow brick building wedged between a coffee shop and a vintage bookstore. The neighborhood was old but gentrifying, full of murals and small businesses with hand-painted signs. Caleb parked on the street and found Elena waiting outside, wearing jeans and a canvas jacket, her hair loose around her shoulders. You made it, she said, walking over. Said I would. He looked up at the building. What is this place? Come see. She unlocked the door and led him inside. The space was empty, just exposed brick walls, hardwood floors scuffed with age, and tall windows that let in slanted afternoon light. It smelled like dust and old wood and possibility. It used to be a dance studio, Elena said, her voice echoing slightly. But it's been vacant for 2 years. The owner's willing to lease it. Caleb turned in a slow circle, taking it in. For what? For the foundation. She walked to the center of the room, arms spread. I've been thinking about what you said, about not waiting. So I started looking into what it would take to actually do this, register as a nonprofit, find a space, hire people. And I found this place. Elena, I know it's a lot, she said quickly, and I know I don't have all the answers yet. But I keep thinking about women who are where I was a month ago, trapped, scared, not knowing where to turn. And if I can build something that helps even one person, then it's worth it. Caleb looked at her standing there in the middle of that empty room, and he saw it, the determination, the fear, the hope, all tangled together. She wasn't pretending this would be easy. She was just choosing to do it anyway. This is a good space, he said. You think so? Yeah, it's got bones. Good light, central location. He walked to one of the windows, looked out at the street. You'd need to do some work. Paint, maybe partition off a few rooms for offices or counseling spaces. But yeah, it could work. Elena came to stand beside him. I don't know what I'm doing, Caleb. Nobody does when they start. That's not as comforting as you think it is. He smiled. You'll figure it out. You're smart, you're determined, and you actually give a damn. That's more than most people. She turned to face him, and there was something vulnerable in her expression. Will you help me? Help you how? I don't know yet, but She hesitated. I trust you, and I don't trust a lot of people. Caleb felt the weight of that statement settle over him. Trust wasn't something given lightly, especially not by someone who'd spent her life surrounded by people who wanted something from her. I'm not a nonprofit guy, he said carefully. I fix cars and tow trucks. That's what I know. I don't need a nonprofit guy, Elena said. I need someone who's honest. Someone who'll tell me when I'm screwing up. Someone who... She stopped, searching for the words. Someone who shows up. And there it was again. That thing she kept saying, like it meant more than it should. Like it meant everything. All right, Caleb said. I'll help. Elena's face broke into a smile, and before he could react, she'd thrown her arms around him. He stood there, awkward and uncertain, before slowly returning the hug. Thank you, she said into his shoulder. Don't thank me yet. You might regret this. She pulled back, still smiling. I doubt that. They spent the next hour walking through the space, Elena pointing out where things could go. A reception area here, meeting rooms there, maybe a small library of resources. Caleb listened, occasionally offering suggestions, but mostly just letting her talk. It was clear she'd been thinking about this non-stop, mapping it out in her head until it felt real. I want to call it Crossroads, she said, as they stood by the windows again. Because that's what it is, right? A place where people can choose a different path. I like it, Caleb said. You're not just saying that. I don't just say things. She laughed. No, you don't. They locked up and walked outside together. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the street. Elena leaned against her car, keys in hand, and looked at him. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you say yes to helping me? Caleb thought about that. Because you're doing something worth doing, and because... He stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence without saying too much. Because what? Because I think you're brave, he said finally, and I want to see what happens when you stop doubting yourself. Elena stared at him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then she said, quiet but certain, You see me differently than other people do. How do other people see you? Like a project or a problem or a prize? She looked down at her keys. You just see me. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. So he just nodded, and they stood there in the fading light, the city humming around them. Tut. 2 days later, Elena called him at 9 a.m, her voice tight with panic. Caleb, I need your help. He was in the middle of replacing a transmission, but he wiped his hands and stepped away from the car. What happened? My father, She took a shaky breath. He found out about the building, about the foundation, and he's threatening to block the lease. He knows the landlord, and he's... Her voice broke. He's trying to stop me. Caleb's jaw tightened. Where are you? At the building. I came to meet with the landlord, but he called while I was on my way and said he needed to reconsider. I know it's my father. I know it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Caleb, you don't have to... I'm already on my way. He told his assistant to handle the transmission, grabbed his keys, and drove downtown faster than he probably should have. When he got to the building, Elena was pacing outside, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up as he approached, relief washing over her face. He's here, she said into the phone. I'll call you back. She hung up and walked over. Thank you for coming. What's going on? The landlord, Mr. Chen, he said my father called him this morning, told him I was unstable, that I didn't have the funds to cover the lease, that it would be a liability to rent to me. Her hands were shaking. And now he's reconsidering, even though we had a verbal agreement. Did you sign anything? Not yet. We were supposed to finalize today, Caleb thought for a moment. You said he's inside? Yeah. He agreed to meet with me, but I can tell he's already made up his mind. Then let's change it. Elena blinked. How? By showing him you're serious. Before she could ask what he meant, Caleb walked to the door and held it open. Elena hesitated, then followed. Mr. Chen was a small man in his 60s, standing near the windows with his arms crossed. He looked uncomfortable when they walked in. Ms. Ward, he said. And you are? Caleb Hayes, Caleb said, extending a hand. I'm helping Elena with the foundation. Mr. Chen shook his hand reluctantly. I see. I understand you have some concerns about the lease, Caleb said. I do. Your father... He glanced at Elena. He painted a concerning picture. My father is trying to control me, Elena said, her voice steady now. That's all this is. I have the funds. I have a business plan. I have everything you asked for. He said you left your family on bad terms, that you're... Mr. Chen struggled for the words. Not in a stable place. I left because I needed to, Elena said. And yes, it's been hard, but that doesn't mean I'm not capable. Mr. Chen looked between them, clearly torn. Can I say something? Caleb asked. Go ahead. I've known Elena for a few weeks now, and in that time, I've watched her go from scared and uncertain to someone who's building something real. She's gotten a job, found an apartment, put together a plan for this foundation. She's not unstable. She's just getting started. Mr. Chen frowned. And you are… what? Her boyfriend. No, Caleb said. I'm her friend. And I'm telling you, if you give her this space, she's going to do something good with it. My father will keep pushing, Elena said. I won't lie to you about that. But I'm not going to back down either. I'll sign whatever lease you want. I'll pay up front for 3 months if that makes you feel better. Just please don't let him take this from me. Mr. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. Your father is a powerful man. I know. He could make things difficult for me. I know that too. But Mr. Chen walked to the window, looked out at the street. I've been in this business a long time, and I've learned to trust my gut. And my gut says you're serious about this. Elena's eyes widened. So you'll lease it to me on one condition. Anything. You prove me right. Mr. Chen turned to face her. You build this foundation. You help people. You make this space matter. Can you do that? Yes, Elena said without hesitation. I can. Mr. Chen nodded slowly. Then we have a deal. Elena let out a breath that sounded like a sob, but she was smiling. She shook Mr. Chen's hand, then Caleb's, then turned away and pressed her hands to her face. I'll have the paperwork ready by Monday, Mr. Chen said. He glanced at Caleb. You're a good friend to her. I try, Caleb said. After Mr. Chen left, Elena turned to Caleb, and there were tears on her cheeks. I can't believe you did that, she said. I didn't do anything. You convinced him. No, you showed up. She crossed to him, and this time when she hugged him, he didn't hesitate. You always show up. Caleb held her, feeling the way she trembled against him, and thought about how many times he'd been told that showing up wasn't enough, that he needed to do more, be more, fix things he couldn't fix. But standing there with Elena, he realized something. Sometimes, showing up was everything. That night, Caleb got home to find Mia waiting at the kitchen table with a suspicious expression. You're late again, she said. I know, sorry. Was it Elena? He set his keys down and opened the fridge. Yeah. Are you two dating? No. But you want to. Caleb grabbed a beer and turned to face his daughter. Where is this coming from? You've been different, Mia said. Like, lighter, less stressed. I figured it was because of her. It's not that simple. Why not? Caleb sat down across from her. Because I've got you to think about. And work. And 100 other things. I can't just what? Be happy? He stared at her. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant. Mia leaned forward. Dad, you've been alone for 10 years. And yeah, I'm your priority. I get that. But I'm not going to be a kid forever. And I don't want you to end up… She stopped, searching for the words. I don't want you to be alone when I leave. Caleb felt something crack in his chest. You're 12, you're not leaving. Not yet, but someday. She reached across the table and touched his hand. And I want to know you'll be okay when I do. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just squeezed her hand and nodded. So you like her? Mia asked. Yeah, Caleb admitted. I like her. Then stop being dumb about it. He laughed despite himself. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just haven't been paying attention. The next day, Elena called and asked if he wanted to grab lunch. Caleb said yes without overthinking it, and they met at a sandwich place near the building. They talked about the lease, about her plans for renovations, about the nonprofit paperwork she was drowning in. It was easy, comfortable, and Caleb found himself laughing more than he had in months. But then, halfway through the meal, Elena set down her sandwich and looked at him. Can I tell you something? She asked. Sure. I've been thinking about what you said, about people seeing me differently. And I realized I've spent so long being who other people wanted me to be that I forgot how to just be myself. She paused. But when I'm with you, I don't feel that pressure. I just feel seen. Caleb's throat tightened. Elena, I'm not saying this to make things weird, she said quickly. I just wanted you to know, because it matters. You matter. He looked at her across the table, and for the first time he let himself acknowledge what he'd been avoiding for weeks. He cared about her, not just as someone he'd helped, but as someone he wanted in his life. "You matter to me too," he said. Elena smiled, and it was the kind of smile that changed everything. Dead. But the next morning, everything fell apart. Caleb was at the shop when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Hayes?" The voice was smooth, professional, unfamiliar. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Marcus Lang. I'm an attorney representing Richard Ward." Caleb's stomach dropped. "What do you want?" "Mr. Ward would like to meet with you today, if possible." "I don't have anything to say to him." "He believes you do. He's willing to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. 1 hour." "And if I say no?" There was a pause. "Mr. Ward is a man who values directness, Mr. Hayes. He simply wants to understand your intentions regarding his daughter." "My intentions are none of his business." "Perhaps, but he's asking anyway." Another pause. "Will you meet with him?" Caleb thought about saying no, about hanging up and blocking the number, but something told him this wasn't going away. "Fine," he said. 1 hour. Send me the address." He hung up and immediately called Elena, but it went to voicemail. He left a message. "Your father wants to meet with me. I'm going. I'll call you after." Then he got in his truck and drove downtown, his hands tight on the wheel. The coffee shop was upscale, the kind of place where a latte cost $8, and everyone looked like they worked in tech. Richard Ward was already there, sitting at a corner table, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Caleb's truck. Caleb walked over and sat down without being invited. "Mr. Hayes," Richard said. "Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want?" Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Direct. I appreciate that. I want to understand what you're doing with my daughter." "I'm helping her." "Helping her do what? Leave her family? Throw away her future?" "She's building her own future," Caleb said. "You just don't like that you're not controlling it." Richard's expression hardened. "You think you know my daughter after a few weeks?" "I think I know her better than you do." "Do you?" Richard leaned forward. "Then you know she's impulsive, that she's spent her entire life making decisions based on emotion rather than logic, that she needs guidance, structure. She needs freedom," Caleb interrupted, "and you're too scared to give it to her." Richard stared at him. "You have a daughter, don't you?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "What's your point?" "My point is that you should understand. When you love someone, you protect them, even from themselves." "That's not protection," Caleb said. "That's control." "Is it?" Richard sat back, crossing his arms. "Tell me, Mr. Hayes, what are your intentions with Elena?" "I don't have intentions. I'm her friend." "Just her friend?" Caleb didn't answer. "I thought so." Richard's smile was cold. "You're a single father, blue collar, no college degree. You work in a garage and live paycheck to paycheck. And my daughter, she's brilliant, wealthy, capable of extraordinary things. Do you really think this ends well for you?" "This isn't about me." "Isn't it?" Richard leaned forward again. "You're a good man, Mr. Hayes, I can see that, but you're out of your depth here. Elena's going through a phase. Eventually, she'll realize what she's given up, and when she does, she'll come back. And when that happens, I don't want her carrying the weight of some misguided relationship that never should have started." "You're wrong about her," Caleb said quietly. "She's not coming back. Not to the life you want for her." "We'll see." Richard stood, buttoning his jacket. "But until then, I strongly suggest you reconsider your involvement, for both your sakes." He walked out, leaving Caleb sitting alone at the table, his coffee untouched. Caleb sat there for a long time, Richard's words echoing in his head. Out of your depth. Misguided relationship. The worst part was, some of it was true. He was out of his depth. He didn't belong in Elena's world, and he never would. But that didn't mean he was wrong to care about her. His phone buzzed. "Elena. Where are you? Are you okay?" He stared at the message, then typed back. "I'm fine. Can we talk?" "Yes. Come to the building." He drove there in a fog, barely registering the traffic. When he arrived, Elena was waiting outside, worry etched across her face. What happened? She asked as he got out of the truck. Your father wanted to warn me off. Elena's expression darkened. What did he say? It doesn't matter. Caleb? He's right about one thing, Caleb said. I don't belong in your world. I don't know anything about foundations or nonprofits or, he gestured vaguely, any of this. I'm just a guy who fixes cars. Elena grabbed his arm. Stop. Stop saying that like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, it's just the truth. No. The truth is that you've shown up for me when no one else did. The truth is that you see me for who I am, not who my father wants me to be. The truth is, she stopped, her voice breaking. The truth is, I don't know if I can do this without you. Caleb looked at her, and he saw it. The fear, the vulnerability, the hope. And he realized Richard Ward was wrong. This wasn't about what world either of them came from. It was about choosing to be there for someone, even when it was hard. You can do this without me, he said gently, but you don't have to. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Promise me you won't leave. I'm not going anywhere. She stepped forward and kissed him, quick and desperate, and Caleb froze for half a second before kissing her back. It wasn't smooth or perfect. It was messy and uncertain and real. When they pulled apart, Elena was smiling through her tears. Sorry, she said. I should have asked first. It's okay, Caleb said, his heart pounding. You can ask any time. And standing there on that street, with the city loud and indifferent around them, Caleb realized he'd already made his choice. They didn't talk about the kiss for 3 days, not because they were avoiding it, but because there was too much else happening. The lease paperwork needed signatures, contractors had to be hired. Elena's nonprofit registration hit a snag with the state filing system. Caleb helped where he could, mostly by being there when Elena spiraled into panic mode, which happened approximately every 6 hours. On the 4th day, Mia cornered him in the kitchen. So you kissed her, she said, not looking up from her cereal. Caleb froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. How do you... You've been smiling at your phone. You never smile at your phone. She finally looked up, grinning. Plus, you're wearing the shirt that doesn't have a stain on it. Dead giveaway. I hate that you notice everything. I hate that you think I don't. She tilted her head. So are you guys, like, together now? I don't know what we are. Have you talked about it? No. Why not? Because we're adults, and it's complicated. Mia rolled her eyes. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Thanks for the input. You should bring her over for dinner. Caleb set down his coffee. Absolutely not. Why not? I want to meet her. Because you'll interrogate her. I promise I won't. You're literally interrogating me right now. Mia grinned wider. Fine, but I'm meeting her eventually. You can't hide her forever. I'm not hiding her. I'm just... He stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Scared, Mia supplied. I'm not scared. You are. But that's okay. She stood and grabbed her backpack. You should still bring her to dinner. After he dropped Mia at school, Caleb sat in the truck for a few minutes, staring at his phone. Finally, he texted Elena. You want to come over for dinner tomorrow? Mia wants to meet you. Her response came back immediately. Is this the meeting the kid dinner? Yes. I'm terrified. She's 12. How scary can she be? I'll let you know after I survive. Caleb smiled despite himself, then drove to work. The next evening, Caleb spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to make the house look presentable. He cleaned the kitchen, hid the pile of unfolded laundry in his bedroom, and attempted to cook something that wasn't takeout or frozen pizza. He settled on pasta, hard to mess up, reasonably impressive if you added enough garlic. Mia watched him from the couch, amused. You're freaking out. I'm not freaking out. You've wiped down that counter 3 times. It was dirty. It's never been that clean in your life. Caleb threw the dish towel at her. She caught it, laughing. The doorbell rang at 6:30. Caleb took a breath, wiped his hands on his jeans, and opened the door. Elena stood there, holding a bottle of wine and looking like she might bolt. She'd dressed down, jeans, a sweater, her hair pulled back, but she still looked out of place on his front porch, like a painting hung in the wrong room. Hi, she said. Hi, come in. She stepped inside, glancing around with the kind of careful attention people use when they're trying not to be obvious about judging their surroundings. Caleb saw his house through her eyes: worn furniture, scuffed floors, soccer trophies on the mantel next to framed school photos. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. "It's nice," Elena said, and she sounded like she meant it. "It's small. It's warm." She held out the wine. "I didn't know what to bring, so this is great, thanks." Mia appeared in the doorway to the living room, arms crossed, studying Elena with the kind of intensity usually reserved for science experiments. "You're Elena, and you're Mia." Elena smiled, but Caleb could see the nerves underneath it. "It's really nice to meet you." "You too." Mia walked closer, still assessing. "Dad says you're starting a nonprofit." "I am. Well, trying to." "What kind?" "It's a foundation to help women who need a fresh start. Resources, counseling, job placement, that kind of thing." Mia nodded slowly. "That's cool." "Thanks." There was a beat of silence. Then Mia said, "Dad's making pasta. It's probably going to be weird." "Hey," Caleb protested. "It's true. You put too much garlic in everything." Elena laughed, and some of the tension eased. "I like garlic." "Then you'll love this," Mia said, grinning. They moved into the kitchen, and Caleb served the pasta while Mia set the table with exaggerated care, clearly enjoying her role as co-host. They sat down, and for the first few minutes, conversation was stilted. Polite questions about school, work, the weather. But then Mia asked Elena about the foundation, and Elena started talking, and Caleb watched the two of them fall into an easy rhythm. "So, how did you know you wanted to do this?" Mia asked, twirling pasta on her fork. "I didn't at first," Elena admitted. "I just knew I needed to leave a situation that wasn't good for me. Your dad helped me figure out the rest." Mia glanced at Caleb. "He's good at that." "He is." Elena smiled at him across the table, and Caleb felt something warm settle in his chest. "What was the situation?" Mia asked. "If you don't mind me asking." "Mia," Caleb started. "It's okay," Elena said. She set down her fork, considering. "My father is very controlling. He wanted me to live a certain life, marry a certain person, do certain things. And for a long time, I did what he wanted because it was easier than fighting. But eventually, I realized I was disappearing, so I left." Mia nodded, processing this. "That must have been scary." "It was. It still is sometimes." "But you're doing it anyway." "Yeah, I'm doing it anyway." Mia looked at her father again, and Caleb saw something shift in her expression. Approval, maybe, or understanding. "I like her," she announced. "Subtle," Caleb said. "I'm just saying." Mia stood and started clearing plates. "You guys want dessert? We have ice cream." "I'd love some," Elena said. While Mia dug through the freezer, Elena leaned closer to Caleb. "She's amazing," she whispered. "She's a nightmare." "I heard that," Mia called from the kitchen. Elena laughed, and Caleb realized this was the first time in years he'd had someone over for dinner who wasn't family. The first time his house had felt like it could hold more than just him and Mia, and it didn't feel wrong. It felt possible. After dessert, Mia excused herself to do homework, but not before giving Elena a hug that lasted a beat too long. When she disappeared upstairs, Elena turned to Caleb. "I think she's vetting me." "She absolutely is. Did I pass?" "You'll find out tomorrow when she gives me the full report." They moved to the couch, and for a while they just sat there, not talking, the house quiet around them. Finally, Elena said, "Thank you for this, for letting me into your life." "You say that like it's a big deal." "It is to me." She looked at him. I know this is all complicated. My father, the foundation, everything. And I don't want to make your life harder." "You're not." "But what if I do? What if he comes after you, or Mia, or—" Caleb took her hand. "Elena, stop." She fell silent, watching him. "Your father doesn't get to decide what happens here," Caleb said. "Neither does anyone else. This is our choice, mine and yours. And yeah, it's complicated, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it." Elena's eyes shimmered. "You always know what to say?" "I really don't. I'm just honest." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that until the sky outside turned dark. The following week brought a new problem. Elena's nonprofit application was approved, But the initial funding she'd been counting on, a grant from a women's advocacy group, fell through. Without it, she couldn't afford the renovations on the building, couldn't hire staff, couldn't move forward. Caleb found her sitting on the floor of the empty space, paperwork scattered around her, looking defeated. "Hey," he said, crouching beside her. "What's going on?" "The grant didn't come through. They said my application was strong, but they had too many qualified candidates and not enough money." She laughed, hollow. "Story of my life. So you find another grant. I've applied to 6 already. They all take months to process, and I don't have months. The lease starts next month, and if I can't show progress..." She broke off, frustrated. "I'm going to lose this space before I even start." Caleb sat down beside her, thinking. "How much do you need?" "For renovations? Probably 30,000, maybe more." He winced. That was more than he made in a year. "What about investors?" "I've reached out to a few people, but nobody wants to take a chance on an unproven nonprofit run by someone with no experience." "What about your father?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "He'd give me the money in a heartbeat, and then he'd own me again." Caleb nodded, understanding. They sat in silence for a while, the late afternoon light slanting through the windows. Then Elena said, quiet but determined, "I have an idea, but you're going to think it's crazy. Try me. There's an estate, about 2 hours north of here. It belonged to my grandmother, my mother's mother. She left it to me when she died, but it's been sitting vacant for 5 years because my father didn't want me to have it." "Why not?" "Because it's mine, truly mine. He can't control it or take it away. And it's worth a lot, probably close to 2 million. She looked at Caleb. "I could sell it. Use the money to fund the foundation." But it was the only thing my grandmother left me, the only piece of her I have left. And once it's gone," her voice broke. "I don't know. It feels like losing her all over again." Caleb understood that. Letting go of something that mattered, even when it made sense, wasn't easy. "Is there another way?" "Not that I can see." "Then maybe you need to go see it before you decide." Elena looked at him. "Will you come with me?" "Yeah, of course." They drove north the following Saturday, Mia riding in the back seat with her headphones on, watching the landscape blur past. Elena had been quiet for most of the drive, staring out the window, lost in thought. Caleb didn't push. He just drove. The estate was tucked into rolling hills surrounded by old trees and overgrown gardens. The house itself was massive, 3 stories, stone and wood, with wide porches and tall windows. It looked like something out of a different era, elegant and slightly faded. Elena got out of the truck and stood there, staring. "You okay?" Caleb asked. "I haven't been here since I was 16, she said. "I forgot how beautiful it is." They walked up to the house, and Elena unlocked the door with a key she'd carried for years. Inside, everything was covered in dust sheets, the air stale and still. But underneath it, Caleb could see the bones of something remarkable. Hardwood floors, crown molding, a grand staircase leading to the second floor. "My grandmother used to host parties here," Elena said, walking through the foyer. "Big, loud, wonderful parties. She didn't care what my father thought. She just lived." Mia wandered off to explore, her footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. Caleb followed Elena into what looked like a library, floor-to-ceiling shelves still full of books. "She taught me to read in this room," Elena said, running her hand along a shelf. "She'd sit right here and we'd go through these books for hours. She's the one who told me I could be anything I wanted, that I didn't have to live the life my father chose." "She sounds like she was something." "She was." Elena turned to face him, and there were tears on her cheeks. "I don't know if I can sell this, Caleb. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Caleb crossed to her, wiping the tears away with his thumb. "Then don't. But the foundation, we'll figure something else out. We always do. There's nothing else. This is the only option." "Then we make a new option." Elena looked at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. "How?" "I don't know yet. But I'm not letting you give up the only piece of your grandmother you have left. Not for this. But it's for something good. Something she would have wanted." "Maybe," Caleb said. "But she also would have wanted you to have a piece of her to hold on to. And that matters too. Elena stared at him, and then, without warning, she started to cry. Really cry. The kind of tears that had been building for years. Caleb pulled her close, letting her fall apart against him, while Mia's footsteps echoed somewhere overhead. When Elena finally pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "I have another idea," she said. "Yeah? What if I don't sell it? What if I use it?" Caleb frowned. "Use it how?" "Turn it into the foundation. This place is huge. We could have offices, counseling rooms, even residency spaces for women who need somewhere safe to stay while they get back on their feet." She looked around and he could see her mind working. It would need work. A lot of work. But it's possible. That would take serious money. "I know, but maybe—" She stopped, thinking. "Maybe I could get investors on board if I show them what the space could be. Not just plans on paper, but the actual location. This place has history. It has heart. That's worth something." Caleb looked around the library, imagining it full of people instead of dust. It could work. "You think so?" "Yeah, I do." Elena grabbed his face and kissed him, hard and grateful, and a little desperate. When they broke apart, Mia was standing in the doorway, grinning. "Gross," she said. "How long have you been standing there?" Caleb asked. "Long enough." She walked into the room, looking around. "This place is amazing. Are we keeping it?" "We're keeping it," Elena said, still holding Caleb's hand. Mia nodded, satisfied. "Good. It'd be stupid to sell it." Over the next 2 weeks, Elena threw herself into the new plan with the kind of intensity that would have been exhausting to watch if it wasn't so impressive. She brought contractors out to the estate, got estimates, put together a presentation for potential investors. Caleb helped where he could, mostly by driving her back and forth, offering opinions on floor plans, and reminding her to eat when she forgot. And slowly, impossibly, it started to come together. She landed her first investor, a woman who'd built a tech company from nothing and wanted to give back. Then another and another. People responded to the estate, to Elena's vision, to the idea of turning something old and forgotten into something vital. But not everyone was supportive. Richard Ward showed up unannounced one afternoon while Elena was at the estate meeting with an architect. Caleb was there too, helping move furniture out of one of the upstairs rooms. He heard the car pull up, looked out the window, and saw Richard getting out of a black sedan. "Elena," Caleb called down the stairs. "Your father's here." He heard her voice go quiet, then footsteps. She appeared at the bottom of the staircase just as Richard walked through the front door. "Elena," Richard said, his tone clipped. "We need to talk." "I'm in the middle of a meeting." "Cancel it." "No." Richard's jaw tightened. He glanced at Caleb, then back to his daughter. "You're turning your grandmother's home into some kind of, what, shelter?" "It's a foundation," Elena said evenly. "And yes, she left you this house as a legacy, and you're throwing it away." "I'm using it. There's a difference." "You're using it for strangers." "She would have wanted that." "You don't know what she would have wanted." "I knew her better than you did," Elena said, her voice hard now. "She hated the way you controlled Mom, hated the way you tried to control me. This is exactly what she would have wanted, me using her house to help people break free." Richard stared at her, and for a moment Caleb thought he might explode. But then he just shook his head, his expression cold. "You're making a mistake, Elena, and when this all falls apart, and it will, don't come crying to me." "I won't," Elena said, "because it's not going to fall apart. And even if it does, I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours." Richard looked at Caleb. "This is your influence." "No," Caleb said. "This is her choice. You've poisoned her against me. I've just shown her what it looks like when someone doesn't try to control her every move." Richard's expression turned dangerous. "Be careful, Mr. Hayes. You're playing a game you don't understand." "I'm not playing anything," Caleb said. "I'm just here." For a long moment, the three of them stood there in the dusty foyer, tension thick enough to cut. Then Richard turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Elena let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He's going to keep coming after us." "Let him," Caleb said. "We're not backing down." Elena looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Gratitude, maybe, or something deeper. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Good thing you don't have to find out. She crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his chest. Caleb held her, feeling the way she trembled, and made a silent promise to himself. Whatever Richard Ward threw at them, they'd handle it, together. Chet. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in front of a room full of potential donors and laid out her vision for the Crossroads Foundation. She talked about the estate, about the women they'd serve, about turning pain into purpose. She was nervous. Caleb could see it in the way her hands shook slightly, but her voice never wavered. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping, and the rest joined in. Afterward, Elena found Caleb in the hallway, her eyes bright with disbelief. "They're in, all of them. I told you they would be. We have enough to start renovations. We can actually do this." Caleb pulled her into a hug, and she laughed against his shoulder, the sound shaky with relief and joy. "Thank you," she said, "for believing in me, for not letting me give up." "You never needed me to believe in you," Caleb said. "You just needed to believe in yourself." Elena pulled back, looking up at him. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a second Caleb couldn't breathe. Then he said, rough and honest, "I love you too." They kissed there in the hallway, and it felt like a beginning. The renovations took 4 months, and in that time, Caleb learned more about drywall, electrical wiring, and bureaucratic red tape than he'd ever wanted to know. He worked his regular jobs during the day, then drove out to the estate in the evenings to help however he could. Elena was there almost constantly, overseeing every detail, pushing contractors, making decisions, running herself ragged. More than once, Caleb found her asleep in her car in the driveway at dawn, too exhausted to make the drive back to her apartment. "You're going to burn out," he told her one night as they sat on the front porch, sharing a container of takeout Chinese food. "I can't stop now," Elena said, stabbing at her lo mein with a plastic fork. "We're so close. You can stop long enough to sleep in an actual bed." "I will. When it's done." Caleb set down his food and turned to face her. "Elena, you've been running on fumes for weeks. You're allowed to rest." "I'm fine." "You're not. And if you collapse, this whole thing falls apart." She looked at him, and he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. Not just physical, but something deeper. "What if I stop and it all disappears? What if I wake up and this was just—" She gestured vaguely at the house. "Just some dream I had? It's not a dream, it's real. You made it real." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I'm scared, Caleb." "Of what?" "That I'm not enough, that I'll mess this up, that everyone who invested in me will realize they made a mistake." Caleb reached over and took her hand. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "Someone who's already done the impossible. You left everything you knew. You stood up to your father. You built something from nothing. You've already proven yourself. The rest is just details." Elena squeezed his hand. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't. I'm just telling you what I see." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in the cool evening air, listening to the sounds of the countryside, crickets, distant traffic, the wind through the trees. "I love you," Elena said quietly. "I love you too. Even when I'm being stubborn and refusing to sleep?" "Especially then." She smiled against his shoulder, and for a moment everything felt possible. The foundation officially opened on a Saturday in late September, exactly 1 year after that storm-soaked night when Caleb had first found Elena stranded on a dark road. The estate had been transformed. Fresh paint, new furniture, offices and counseling rooms, and a residential wing with 6 bedrooms for women who needed somewhere safe to land. Elena had hired a small staff, a director, 2 counselors, an intake coordinator, and she'd convinced Caleb to come on as operations manager, overseeing the day-to-day logistics. "I don't know anything about managing operations," he'd protested when she first asked. "You know how to fix things when they break. You know how to show up when people need you. That's all this is." "That's a massive oversimplification." "Maybe, but you're still perfect for it." And somehow, impossibly, she'd been right. Caleb found himself coordinating with contractors, managing supply orders, troubleshooting problems as they arose. It wasn't that different from running his roadside service, just on a bigger scale. And it felt good. Not just the work itself, but knowing the work mattered. On opening day, the estate was full of people, donors, community leaders, local press, and 3 women who would be the foundation's first residents. Elena stood at the front of the room, nervous but determined, and gave a speech Caleb knew she'd rewritten at least 20 times. "A year ago," she said, her voice carrying across the crowded room, "I was lost. I didn't know who I was or what I wanted. I only knew I needed to leave a life that was suffocating me. And I got in my car and drove until my tire blew out on a dark road in the middle of a storm." Caleb stood at the back of the room with Mia beside him, watching. "A stranger answered a call that wasn't meant for him," Elena continued, "and instead of telling me I'd reached the wrong number, he showed up. He helped me when he had no reason to, and in doing that, he showed me something I'd forgotten, that there are still people in this world who choose kindness over convenience, who show up even when it's hard." She paused, and Caleb saw her eyes find his across the room. "This foundation exists because someone chose to show up for me, and now we're choosing to show up for others. For women who are lost, scared, trapped in situations they don't know how to escape. We're here to tell them you're not alone. There's a path forward, and we'll walk it with you." The room erupted in applause. Elena stepped down from the podium, and people swarmed her with congratulations and questions. Caleb watched from a distance, feeling something huge and overwhelming settle in his chest. Pride, maybe, or just the weight of witnessing something good coming into the world. Mia elbowed him. "She's talking about you." "I know." "You're blushing." "I'm not." He stopped, because he probably was. Mia grinned. "You should go talk to her." "She's busy." "Dad, go." He made his way through the crowd, and when Elena saw him, her face lit up. She excused herself from the conversation she was having and crossed to him. "You were great," Caleb said. "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell." Elena glanced around at the people filling her grandmother's house, and her expression softened. "She would have loved this, my grandmother. She would have been so proud." "She'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Elena looked up at him. "Thank you for all of this. I couldn't have done it without you." "You absolutely could have. But I didn't have to, because you were here." Before Caleb could respond, someone called Elena's name, a reporter wanting an interview. She squeezed his hand and went to handle it, leaving Caleb standing there feeling like he'd somehow stumbled into a life he didn't recognize but didn't want to leave. The first few weeks were chaotic. Systems that looked good on paper fell apart in practice. One of the residents had a crisis in the middle of the night, and Elena spent 3 hours on the phone with a counselor, trying to help. The intake coordinator quit after 2 weeks, overwhelmed by the workload. Money was tight despite the donations, because renovations had gone over budget and operating costs were higher than projected. But slowly, day by day, they figured it out. Caleb found himself working longer hours than he'd expected, but he didn't mind. There was something deeply satisfying about fixing a broken pipe or troubleshooting a heating system and knowing it meant someone had a warm place to sleep. He got to know the residents, women with stories that made his chest ache, women who were rebuilding their lives one painful step at a time. And he learned that showing up wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was just making sure the coffee pot worked or the Wi-Fi stayed connected. One evening, about 6 weeks after opening, Caleb found Elena in the library, surrounded by paperwork. She looked exhausted. "You're still here?" he asked. She glanced up. "I could say the same about you." "I had to replace a toilet, very glamorous." Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm trying to make the budget work for next quarter. It's not looking good." Caleb sat down across from her. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I'm going to have to ask donors for more money, which I hate doing." "They invested in you once. They'll do it again." "Maybe. Or maybe they'll decide this was a mistake and pull out." "Elena, I'm serious, Caleb. We're burning through cash faster than I projected. If we don't get more funding in the next 2 months, we're going to have to cut staff. We're close entirely." Caleb leaned back, thinking, what if we did a fundraiser? We just did one. The opening. No, I mean something bigger. An event. Something that gets attention and brings in real money. Elena frowned. Like what? I don't know. A gala? Auction? Something fancy that rich people like to attend. That would take months to plan. So we have 2 months. We make it work. Elena stared at him. You're serious? Yeah. Why not? Because I've never planned a fundraising gala. Because I don't know the first thing about organizing an event that big. Because... She stopped, exhaling. Because I'm scared it'll fail and I'll look like an idiot. Then we'll fail together, Caleb said. But I don't think we will. Elena looked at him for a long moment, and then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, let's do it. Planning the gala consumed the next 2 months. Elena pulled together a committee of donors and volunteers while Caleb handled logistics, venue, catering, sound system, parking. They decided to hold it at the estate itself, turning the grounds into an outdoor event with tents and string lights and a stage for speakers. But 3 weeks before the gala, Richard Ward made his move. Caleb was at the estate fixing a leaking faucet when Elena burst into the room, her face pale. What happened? He asked, setting down his wrench. My father, She handed him her phone. On the screen was an article from a local news site. Nonprofit founder's troubled past raises questions. The piece detailed Elena's relationship with her father, the way she'd left her family under mysterious circumstances, and suggested that the Crossroads Foundation might be using donor money irresponsibly. This is bullshit, Caleb said. It's worse than that. He planted it. I know he did. Elena's voice shook. He's trying to destroy my credibility right before the gala. Then we fight back. How? If I respond, it looks defensive. If I don't, people will assume it's true. Caleb thought for a moment. What if you tell your story? All of it. On your terms. What do you mean? Write something. A statement. Not defensive, just honest. Tell people why you left, what you're building, why it matters. Put it out before the gala so everyone knows the truth. Elena hesitated. That means exposing everything. My father, my past, all of it. I know. But you've spent your whole life letting him control the narrative. Maybe it's time you took it back. She looked at him, fear and determination warring in her expression. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll do it. Elena's statement went live 2 days later. She wrote about growing up under her father's control, about the suffocating expectations, and the moment she realized she had to leave. She wrote about the foundation, about why it mattered, about the women they were helping, and she wrote about Caleb, not by name, but the idea of him, the stranger who'd shown up when she needed it most. The response was immediate. Some people criticized her, calling her ungrateful or dramatic. But far more people reached out with support, sharing their own stories of escape and survival. Donations started coming in, small amounts mostly, but they added up, and the gala ticket sales, which had been lagging, suddenly sold out. Richard Ward called her the day after the statement went live. Elena put it on speaker so Caleb could hear. You've made a serious mistake, Richard said, his voice cold. No, I've told the truth. You've embarrassed me. You've damaged my reputation. Yeah, I freed myself from your control. There's a difference. Elena, I'm warning you. I'm done with your warnings, Dad. I'm done with all of it. I've built something good here, something that matters, and you can't take that away from me. There was a long pause. Then Richard said, quieter, You think you've won, but you've lost me. Is that really worth it? Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. Yes, it is. Richard hung up. Elena set down the phone and pressed her hands to her face. Caleb crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. You did the right thing, he said. Then why does it hurt so much? Because he's still your father, and that doesn't just go away. She cried against his chest, and Caleb held her until she was done. The night of the gala was perfect, cool and clear. The estate lit up like something out of a dream. Hundreds of people came, filling the tents and the lawn, eating catered food and bidding on auction items. Local musicians played. Elena gave a speech that made half the audience cry, and by the end of the night they'd raised over $300,000. Caleb stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Elena move through the guests, thanking donors and smiling for photos. Mia appeared beside him, dressed up in a way that made him do a double take. When did you get so old? He asked. I'm 12. Same as yesterday. You look older. Good. Maybe people will stop treating me like a kid. Caleb smiled. Not gonna happen. They stood there together watching the party. Then Mia said, Are you gonna marry her? Caleb nearly choked. What? Elena, are you gonna marry her? We haven't, that's not. You should, Mia said matter-of-factly. She's good for you, and you're good for her, and I like her, so yeah, you should marry her. It's more complicated than that. Why? Caleb didn't have a good answer, so he just said, We'll see. Mia grinned. That's not a no. Later, after the guests had left and the cleanup crew was packing up, Caleb found Elena sitting on the front steps of the house, staring up at the stars. You did it, he said, sitting beside her. We did it. Mostly you. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder. I can't believe this is real, that we actually pulled this off. You sound surprised. I am. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. You don't know that. No, but I believe it anyway. Elena smiled. You're ridiculous. I've been told. They sat there in the quiet, the night settling around them. Then Elena said, I've been thinking about something. Yeah? About you and me and what this is. Caleb's heart picked up speed. Okay. I love you, Elena said, and I know you love me, and I know it's fast and it's complicated, and we're both still figuring things out. But I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be careful or practical. I just want. She stopped, searching for the words. I just want you, all of you, for as long as you'll have me. Caleb stared at her, and for a moment he couldn't speak. Then he said, I want that too. Yeah? Yeah. Elena kissed him, and it felt like a promise. Look, 6 months later, on a warm spring afternoon, Caleb and Elena stood in the library of the estate, the same room where her grandmother had taught her to read, and got married. It was a small ceremony, just close friends and the foundation staff and Mia, who cried even though she'd sworn she wouldn't. Richard Ward didn't come. Elena had sent him an invitation, not because she expected him to show up, but because she wanted to give him the chance. He didn't respond, and while it hurt, Elena didn't let it ruin her day. He made his choice, she said to Caleb the night before the wedding. And I've made mine. The wedding was simple and imperfect and exactly what they wanted. Mia was the maid of honor, and she gave a speech that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Elena promised to love Caleb through every busted pipe and late-night tow job. Caleb promised to show up every day for the rest of their lives. And when they kissed, the room erupted in applause, and Caleb thought about how far they'd both come. From a wrong number on a stormy night to this moment, standing in a house full of people they loved, building a life neither of them had planned, but both of them wanted. 1 year after the wedding, the Crossroads Foundation celebrated its second anniversary. The residential program was full, with a waiting list. They'd helped 43 women find jobs, housing, and stability. Elena had been profiled in national magazines, invited to speak at conferences, asked to consult with other organizations. The foundation she'd started in desperation had become something real and lasting, and Caleb had found a new kind of purpose. He still ran his roadside service part-time, but most of his energy went to the foundation, managing operations, mentoring residents, showing up when things broke. He'd never imagined himself doing this kind of work, but it turned out he was good at it, and more importantly, it felt right. On the anniversary, they held a celebration at the estate. Current and former residents came, along with staff and donors and community members. Elena gave a speech, standing at the front of the room with Caleb beside her. 2 years ago, she said, I made a call in the middle of a storm. I reached the wrong number, but somehow I found the right person. And that moment, that wrong call, changed everything. She paused, looking out at the crowd. I started this foundation because I believed people deserved second chances. Because I knew what it felt like to be trapped, to be lost, to not know where to turn. And I wanted to create a place where women could find their way forward. Her voice grew stronger. But I've learned something in these 2 years. It's not just about second chances. It's about showing up. It's about choosing every single day to do the hard thing because it's the right thing. It's about building something that matters, even when it's scary, even when you're not sure you can. She turned to Caleb, and he saw tears in her eyes. Someone once told me that strength isn't inherited, it's chosen. And I didn't understand that at the time, but I do now. Because I've watched the women who come through these doors choose strength every single day. I've watched them rebuild their lives piece by piece. I've watched them become who they were always meant to be. She looked back at the crowd. So thank you. To everyone here who believed in this dream. To the women who trusted us with their stories. To the staff who show up day after day. And to the man who answered a call that wasn't meant for him and changed my life. The room erupted in applause. Elena stepped down, and Caleb met her at the bottom of the stairs. That was beautiful, he said. I meant every word. He pulled her close, and they stood there while the celebration continued around them. Two people who'd found each other by accident and built something permanent on purpose. Later that night, after everyone had left and the estate was quiet, Caleb and Elena walked through the grounds. They ended up at the old barn where Elena's tire had blown out that first night, now restored and converted into a workshop where residents learned job skills. Hard to believe this is where it all started, Elena said. On a road about 10 miles from here, actually. Close enough. She looked up at him. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't answered that call? Sometimes, but not in a useful way. What do you mean? I mean, I can imagine 100 different versions of that night, but this is the one that happened, and I'm grateful for it. Elena smiled. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. They're what made this real. She kissed him, soft and slow, and Caleb thought about all the choices that had led them here. The wrong number, the answered call, the decision to help a stranger, the choice to keep showing up, even when it was difficult. And he realized something. Life wasn't about the big moments. It was about the small ones, the daily choice to be present, to care, to try. It was about showing up for the people who mattered and building something worth keeping. Elena pulled back, looking at him with that expression he'd come to know so well, the one that said she saw him, really saw him, and chose him anyway. I love you, she said. I love you too. And standing there in the moonlight, in the shadow of a barn on the grounds of a house that had become a refuge for people who needed it most, Caleb Hayes understood what it meant to be enough. Not perfect, not heroic, just present, just there, just showing up, one call at a time. Because sometimes the right person answers when it matters most, and sometimes that changes everything.